Coming up on this episode, I would like your reaction to the 4 quarterfinals that we have.
I think my first thought is Rich. So Bruno Fernandes against.
So keep listening to find out who Rich got in the cup draw. Hello everyone, welcome to the DraftCast, the place to get all your news about the draft events of the week. This week we have Laurence Hodgkins on, the manager of Tikka Salah. How are you doing, Laurence?
Well, Luke, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Glad to have you back.
Great to be back. It's been a while.
It has. Lots to talk about this week.
Some good, some not so good.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll do our review of the league table. We'll do our weekly team review, so we'll discuss your team's performance from the last week and looking forward to game week 26. We'll make some predictions for game week 26 in terms of who we think team-wise and player-wise will do well. And then we've got an announcement from yourself and your segment. And then we've also got an announcement from the vice president of the draft. And I won't say any more on those until we get there. So make sure you carry on listening to find out what's revealed at the end of the video. So let's start with the league table. Some strong performances this week from the likes of Will and Tom. James has had a good week. Tolly's had a good week as well. Will's topped the league and the league score with 68. Adam's at the bottom with the lowest score of 27. So there's a bit of a gap between top and bottom forming now. Whereas before it's sort of been within 100 points where it's sort of got over that now. Which is not good for Adam. I'm sure he'd like to get back up into the middle of the table at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Will and Tom train keeps on going. Particularly, those teams that have got Man City players. I think 19-game winning streak at the moment, which is just insane. The form we sort of saw a couple of seasons ago. So there doesn't appear to be any sign of let off either. So I think anyone who's got a Man City player at this point will be holding on to them, even with Pep rotation going on in the background, potentially in a double game week. But yeah, obviously Tom's benefited from that. Nice to see Tolly sort of working his way back up, 55 points. Adam seems to be to drift a little bit at the bottom. Rich again, another decent week, above average points tally, which is good to see. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it's you and me, Luke, that seem to be going in the wrong direction at the moment.
I know.
It's one of those things you can't control the uncontrollables, right?
That's it. Yeah, I think my form is starting to drop off. It doesn't help that I've had a couple of industries recently, but yeah, can't make excuses. Need to do something to try and keep up with Tom and Will. Not sure what that's going to be because, like you've already like we've mentioned many times, like you've just touched on there, people don't want to trade at the moment. Really, they want to keep the players they know are doing well for them. So it makes it very difficult to pick up any players that are going to help you.
Yeah. And
I don't think you're going to find many of those players in the waivers list or free agents. So it's tough.
That's definitely a challenge with and maybe this shouldn't be seen as an excuse, but like when you've got 10 players in the league, actually there's very little moving around in the waivers that you might want to pick up, particularly after January when the transfer window is closed. There's a lot of teams that maybe further down earlier on in the season that would have benefited from pickups, and yes, potentially it's almost a disadvantage when you're at the top for a long period of time, and actually the waivers, the players you want to bring in, you can't actually bring in. So yeah, it's a difficult one. Again, looking at the waivers this week, even in fourth for me, I'm just thinking, who do I really want to pick up that's going to make this team any stronger? Yes, players in my team aren't playing particularly well at the moment. Will they sort of turn a corner for the remainder of the season? Who knows?
Yeah,
I guess it's just one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't think there's much more to talk about on the league table front. Tolly has changed his name again to double up leads is nuts. To be fair, I think we've had, there's 5 people have made the most of a double game week. Okay, it's not a full double game week, but the upcoming is a full double game week. So we'll be interested to see what sort of scores we get next week. So yeah, I think we'll move on and we'll, like you've already sort of touched on there, we'll have a discussion about your team. And
where do we start?
What can I say without discussing being knocked out of the cup? Everybody wants to comment, Laurence.
No, everyone's been waiting for it. I've been reflecting this week more than anything. It's very easy to go out into the press and make statements in the heat of the moment, but I just wanted to take a few days and just reflect on the team and how they're feeling and get into their heads understand what went wrong, what we can do to address some of the issues that we've seen in the last few weeks. I think also ultimately my season's been defined as, I think Adam touched on it quite nicely in his segment a couple of weeks back, where he talked about 5-week blocks, and there's blocks where I have really good periods of time, and then there's blocks where I have really poor weeks. And actually, the last 3 weeks have been particularly poor for this team, particularly with the players that are in it. So, hats off to the rest of the league for getting through in the cup. It's one of those things I look forward to seeing the draw later on and who comes out on top.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to apologise because Saints and Ings didn't perform for you like they did for you in the cup final that we were in, which is a shame. Their performance hasn't been great recently, so yeah.
Yeah, it's a really weird one with Southampton because they had such a strong start to the season. Like Bednarek was, I think, the best centre back in the league up until Christmas, and then since then he's just been absolutely atrocious. Minus 9 points in a game against Man United, which is just unheard of. Danny Ings, obviously in and out of injury, hasn't come back and shown the same form that he maybe shown at the start of the season and the end of last season. Particularly with the Euros coming up, you think he would be hitting the ground running, but he's not been great. Son hasn't been great. Potentially the volume of games, a bit of tiredness in the legs, maybe, particularly given the type of player he is and running in behind. Missed Kane for the period he was out. Barkley, again, that was a bit of a gamble trade with Adam. I think, potentially haven't looked at the stats on this, but Adam probably came out quite well on that one. He's just particularly, with Grealish being out, I was hoping that he'd step into that sort of number 10 role and actually perform, but he hasn't really shown signs of that yet. The only reason I'm really holding on to him is because he's got 2 games in hand. And yeah, I mean, what can you say about Warpay? Gets himself into reasonable positions, but he just fails to, convert and score goals.
Yeah.
United just seem to consistently leak goals at the back. Top 4 team can't keep clean sheets. Might be the difference between them being a top 2 team and a top 4 team this season. The only real shining light is Cresswell, who's been, rock solid at the back. I know he didn't perform well this week, but, consistently getting clean sheets and assists for West Ham. So yeah, Rashford had a good week, obviously, just on a positive note, showing glimpses of his best. Again, fairly inconsistent season for him. So we'll see. I mean, not making too many drastic changes in the waivers this week. Not planning on anyway. It's difficult to do that when there's very little to pick from.
Yeah.
Had a few trades thrown in my inbox this week that just aren't very appetizing. People with vultures trying to pick up players for nothing off the back of poor performances. So
yeah,
just need to ignore the voices in the background and keep going.
Fair enough. I was going to ask if any of the trades you've been offered had tempted you, but it doesn't sound like they did. So we'll leave that one there.
Yeah, they mainly revolve around tier one players for tier 2 or tier 3 players off the back of form. And it just doesn't interest me, to be honest. It's one of those things. It's always a gamble with trades, right? You just never know what's going to happen. I could trade Son to Adam tomorrow, today, and he could break his leg this weekend. You just never know.
Exactly. Okay, we'll move on. We'll leave the team review there. I don't think you've answered all my questions really without me having to ask them, so that's good. Let's try and make some predictions for the upcoming game week 26, which is a big double game week. I think record number of fixtures.
Yeah, it's going to be an insane week, I think, points wise. I think the only caveat to that is just the rotation side of things. Like Man City players, where they've got such a good formula right now. Will Pep rotate, or will he stick to his sort of preferred 11 if everyone's fit? Will Aguero come back in? Is a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to know what's going to happen, but we'll probably expect to see a couple of 100-point weeks within the league this week, given how many teams have got 11 players on double game weeks.
Yeah, it will be. I think there'll definitely be a shock if there's no 100s. I'm sure there's a couple of managers that are looking to reach that. So I've put Tom again this week for the highest score. He didn't quite reach it this week, but I think because he's got a few more City players than Will does, he in theory might top him this week and maybe overtake him, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I can't really see anybody else keeping up with Tom this week, but we'll see. You never know. I haven't really digested all the fixtures. I mean, you've got Liverpool versus Sheffield this week, so potentially they might score well, but
yeah,
I just don't think their form sort of suggests they will.
Also got Chelsea, right? Second game.
Yeah.
Which will be a really tough one. City as well. West Ham. So City have got West Ham first game at home, and West Ham notoriously fall apart when they go to City, but this season they're just a completely different outfit. So I'm sure George will have a view on this, but I think potentially West Ham will go to City and do what they've done against other big teams and just sort of not part the bus, but try and sit and play out from the back and look for long balls in behind with Bowen, and particularly with Antonio being fit, he's a real handful. Particularly for if John Stones and Diaz start, he could give them a good game. So I wouldn't be guaranteeing a 5-0 win for City against West Ham this season compared to previous seasons, but who knows? Yeah, you kind of look at those teams that are playing against the guys in the relegation zone, right? Like your West Broms and your Sheffield Uniteds. Yeah, I mean, Tom could have a very good game, double game week. Will could have a very good double game week. Try to think of a game that I would look for that would be quite interesting. I think Spurs have got Burnley and Fulham.
Yeah.
So particularly with Harry Kane, Burnley at home, that could be an interesting one for Will. Also for myself with Son if he turns up, and they've also got Fulham away, so that'll be an interesting sort of London derby that could see some goals potentially, depending on how Mourinho decides to turn out. Another team that interests me this week is Everton, because they've got Southampton at home. Southampton's sort of falling apart, and they've also got West Brom away. So Calvert-Lewin can get his shooting boots back on, and particularly players like Rodriguez start to turn up consistently. They could have a good double game week as well. Yeah,
that's a good shout. So who are you going to go with then out of our guys?
I think, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with one of the top two. It's probably going to have to be Will. I just think, particularly with the players he's got that are sort of hitting form, you think of Barnes, you think of Kane. Yeah, it's tough to see past him. I think with Man City, I think West Ham will give them a decent game. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do start to see some Pep rotation, particularly with the Champions League and the volume of fixtures that have been sort of happening and continue to happen in the league. So,
yep, fair enough. So, player-wise, I have written down a City player, but I want to get your thoughts first as to who you think out of the, which player do you think might top the game week. It's a tough one, I think, because there's so many fixtures. It's, you could pick someone from, maybe 3 teams.
Yeah.
Like we've just discussed there.
I think I'll go with Harry Kane. I think, Burnley at home and Fulham away, I think there's potential there to get some good points for him. Aiming for that, Euro 21 in the summer. So, get his shooting boots back on and hopefully score some goals for Will. City, I mean, which player would you be thinking about for City?
Well, I've actually gone with Sterling this time because he's played most of the recent games and he's done quite well recently. And the reason I haven't gone for like De Bruyne or Gundogan is because since they've been playing together, it doesn't seem like they quite are tying up as well as they were playing on their own before. So it'd be interesting to see how long it takes them to actually work out how to play with each other. Because when I've watched the games, they don't appear to really link well with each other. Whereas, both will either link really well with Sterling and get him a goal. So that's why I've gone with Sterling this week. But you're right, the West Ham game might be tougher than they're expecting.
Yeah, I think particularly with West Ham, they'll probably play 5 at the back, or they'll play, I just think Sterling likes to play between the lines, coming in behind, running at players. I think if West Ham sit relatively deep, it's going to be difficult for him to have the same impact potentially. Having said that, you never know, he could go and score a hat-trick. Who knows, right?
Exactly, and that's why we do it, just for a bit of fun, see if anyone can get it right. So, yeah, let's move on, and we've got your first announcement to do. So I'll let you explain what's going on.
Sure. I was just thinking about the draft and where it started and where it is now, where it's got to, and how we can take it one step further. And I've recently found out that I've been offered a place to run the London Marathon in October, which is awesome news. It's pretty rare that people get a ballot place, so really excited for it. But I thought, as part of that, why not open it up to the draft and say, hey, why doesn't the draft have its own foundation? So I call it the hashtag Drafties Live Foundation. And what I'm proposing is that the league has 3 nominated charities, and that they effectively nominate a charity per year that they fundraise towards. So potentially, off the back of this video, we can have some comments in the YouTube section to get people's ideas. But what do you think?
Yeah, I love that idea. I think you're right. If people can comment down below what charities they'd like for us to put on our list of 3. Did you have any in mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's one that's quite close to my heart, breast cancer now, which I've ran for in the past. But very very open to ideas. I'm thinking, there's some really cool things we can do with this. We could all give Adam £100 to shave his head. We could shave Jimmy's eyebrow. Will and Tom could cycle around the south of France on their Zwift bikes. There's so many things we can do as a group that can actually have a positive impact. So
Yeah.
I think it's nice that we can build something like this into the couple of AGMs socials we do every year. It'd be great for the draft to have a positive impact more widely than just within this group. So I think it could be a really good thing.
I agree. Congratulations on getting a ballot place. Like you said, it doesn't happen very often. When does your training start?
Technically starts now. I mean, it's still 6 months or just under 6 months away. So gonna try and aim high and just start training now and try and get a decent time. But a lot of it will be very much let's fundraise for the right causes and it's nice to have something to train towards, particularly with the lockdown restrictions and stuff. It's a goal to work towards later on this year. And off the back of some positive news with Boris's announcement the other day, and potentially stadiums being opened again in the summer and all those things, and Euro 21 potentially coming to England. That's we've had some really good news in the last week or so, apart from me obviously getting knocked out of the cup, but lots to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't going to bring it up again, Laurence, so you brought that up yourself.
That's all right. I think it'll come up in the comments, it'll come up in the group, it'll continue to come up for a while. Yeah, I've just got to embrace it.
Yeah. You can always bring Adam into the conversation as well, because he was knocked out with you. So
that's true.
You're not on your own.
Yeah, for sure. Got to look out for each other.
Yeah. So great. Really excited about that. We'll see what people suggest. But I think you're right. If you can, if you pick one of the three, so if you want to pick the breast cancer now one, and then we can try and get the other two sorted, and then we'll pick one for when you actually do the marathon.
And it's one of those things where the start of every season we can select the new charity, and as part of that next campaign we have a new charity that we focus on as part of the foundation for the next 9 months of the season. And as part of that we have events that we all attend and get involved in and that sort of thing. Obviously all completely voluntarily. No expectations if people aren't keen, but yeah, it'd be good thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Right, we'll move on to your segment, and I'll let you introduce what you've brought this week.
Okay, so what I wanted to talk about this week is going back to the original draft and looking at looking at the draft rank of the top 50 players and saying, okay, how have those players performed up to this point in the season? And what I've focused on is actually their average points, but their average points per minute played. What I was trying to get at was, okay, for the top 50 ranked players in the league, how have they performed up to the current game week based on the minutes they've played and their sort of average points per minute they've featured in games. So I've done this for the top 50 ranked players at the start of the season. I've then compared that to the current, most up-to-date top 50 players that have averaged the highest number of points per minute, and just to compare the two segments of players to see where we thought we might be at the start of the season based on draft rank to where we are now. Make sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so this first slide I'm sharing with you is taking the top average points by minute for the top 10 players versus the original draft rank. So the columns, the bars in blue highlight the players and their average points per minute versus their original rank. So you can see left-hand side, you've got Fernandez, who average points per minute of 0.09, fairly high rank at the start of the season. And then you've got players like Maddison and Calvert-Lewin that have also got relatively high points per minute statistics versus their draft rank. So if you look at the orange bar and you sort of measure that against the average points, you can see some of the outliers there. So a really, really good example here is Cavani, who's got a very, very good average points per minute stat versus his particular draft rank at the start of the season. So, it's very interesting to see the names on here, particularly, Fernandez, Salah, Kane, Son, Vardy, Bale is in there. So Bale's actually got a really high average points per minute figure. even though he's played very few minutes, and I'll come on to that a bit later on. Mahrez is in there as well. So some big names based on the original draft rank and where they sort of ended up. So any thoughts?
No, it's like you say, it's an interesting graph to look at. I think, like you say, the Bale one is interesting. He's played so few minutes though, hasn't he? So that's probably skews it a bit, but yeah, no, it's interesting.
Definitely skews it, and we'll come on to that in a second. Because what I do is I bring in a percentage of total minutes played over the course of the season versus the total minutes available to play. So that's something we'll come on to in a second. But it's quite interesting because this is sort of looking at the original draft rank from 1 to 50, right? So if you look at Maddison, for example, he's in the top 10 point scorers put in terms of average points per minute, even though his rank was 44th at the start of the season. So it just shows how some players have potentially overachieved and some maybe underachieved.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to my next slide. So this slide, it starts to look a bit busy, but what I've done here is I've basically looked at, out of those players, let's look at those that have played more than 75 minutes of the total minutes that can be played, those that have played between 50 and 75 minutes, 50 and 75%, of total minutes that can be played, 25 and 50, and those that have played less than 25% of the minutes that can be played. And you just look at look at it visually to start with. You look at, the top left. So the players that have played more than 75 minutes, 75% of the available minutes. You've got players like, Fernandes, Salah, Chkns, Son, Calvert-Lewin, that, their points, their average points per minute plot quite nicely with the percentage of minutes they've played of those that are available. But if you then slide further to the right and you look at players like Mane, Aubameyang, Werner, Mount, Firmino, Richarlison, Robertson, and Trent, look at the average points versus the minutes they've played, and look how they sort of tail off versus those at the top. It just shows how, obviously, this doesn't take into account positions and those sorts of things, but how the average points, the distribution looks like for those players that have actually played the vast majority of their minutes this season.
Yeah, that's it's quite a good way to look at it. And like you say, it's going to highlight those that are playing, the majority of all the games, but still not performing as well as people have expected from the start of the season.
Yeah, I think it gets more interesting as you move down the percentages, because you start to look at players that haven't necessarily played that much, but they have impact. I'm thinking particularly those players that come off the bench and maybe score a goal with in the last 10 minutes and that sort of thing. But if we look at the 50 to 75% bracket here, so you'll see the likes of De Bruyne and Vardy at the top. Not unexpected. They've both had injuries, and they both achieved really, high average points per minute over the course of the season where they've played. Jesus is relatively on point with his points. The underperformer here is probably Martial and Pogba, Bernardo Silva, and Zaha actually, in terms of the minutes they've played and the output they've provided over the course of the season so far. And interestingly, Mahrez, probably the obvious outlier here, where he's actually got a pretty high average points per minute figure versus the minutes he's played. So good news for Tolly. He's thinking about what he wants to do with him. He does have a lot of impact when he does play.
Yeah, it's kind of like what he was like last season.
Yeah,
he would come on and make an impact, but if he started, didn't really do much.
I think what this does, it kind of reinforces what we know about the players that aren't performing particularly well. So you look at Martial, for example, he's got he's played quite a lot this season, but his output doesn't necessarily reflects the player that he is or should be. The same with Bernardo Silva, interestingly, at City. Not sure what Jack's thoughts would be on this, but he's played quite a bit, and his points haven't necessarily been where you would want them to be for a player in that position at City. So Zaha, I know Rich had him quite a lot this season, but again, for the amount of time he's played, reasonable sort of points per minute figure, but not sort of in the elites that you see further to the left. Okay, and then I've sort of diving deeper into those that have played less, so those that have played sort of 25 to 50% of minutes played. You can see sort of Jimenez on the left-hand side, and I know a very, very horrible injury that he had with David Luiz against Arsenal, but a reasonable sort of return on points per minute when he was fit. And then you look at the likes of Pulisic and Havertz that have just completely underperformed so far this season. And like we talked about in the previous slide, but Cavani has actually got a pretty good points to minute ratio to the percentage of time he's played. So, really positive impact sort of signing for Adam. I know he's offered him out and he's been injured last week or so, but he was the one that stood out to me in terms of strikers that actually scores quite a few points given the time that he plays. And then you've got the likes of, and these won't come as a surprise. We've got Pepe and Willian that have obviously underperformed for their respective clubs this season when they've played. Ziyech has actually got a pretty high points to minutes played ratio, which I was really surprised about. I might have to check my statistics, but that'll be encouraging for Jack. I know he sent them to the agency, but potentially want to pick up should he come back into the team. Greenwood and Bergwijn, obviously, we know Greenwood's been pretty woeful for United, and I think Tolly shipped into the agency eventually, but yeah, he's not been scoring or collecting points in the way he probably should be, given the way he plays and the minutes he's had to do that. And Bergwijn, just when he has come on for Tottenham, hasn't really delivered. Another really interesting one here is Giroud, who gets really good points for the time he gets on the pitch. He's a really efficient striker for Chelsea. So I'm not sure who has Giroud. I'm not sure if you know, but yeah, definitely one to hold on to.
I think it's Tolly.
Yeah, Torres is in here as well, which I thought was quite interesting. Decent points for time he's actually played. So I think with these sorts of players, if you're thinking about stocking up on your bench, players coming off the bench potentially, they're good players to have. And the bottom segment here just talks about those that have played sort of up to 25% of the total minutes available to play. You can see Aguero in there. This graph doesn't tell us too much, but a reasonable return of points per minute when he has played this season. And like we talked about in the first slide, Gareth Bale there has got exceptionally high points per minute when he has actually featured for Tottenham. And Dele Alli's the other way. He's although he played well in midweek in Europe, and I know a lot of players will be looking at signing him this week, but when he has come on, when he has played for Tottenham, he hasn't really delivered. Same with Carlos Vinicius for Tottenham. Van der Beek was obviously he's getting very few opportunities at United, and when he does play, he's not playing particularly well. So he's in the Fernandez's shadow most of the time. So yeah, this slide, just in summary, is basically looking at what's the average points per minute by player in the top 50 draft ranks as a percentage of the total minutes available that they could have played. So very much focused on the rank of the players at the start of the season, based on what the draft decided they would be. And the next slide goes on to look in a bit more detail at actually where we are now. So unless you have any questions, I'll carry on.
No, carry on. Yeah, it's all good so far.
Okay, so this can obviously be misleading, and you can interpret it how you want to. But if you look at Lingard, for example, he's basically got 0.1 of a point for every minute he's played so far this season. And this is just a high level sort of snapshot of the top 10 average points across the draft up to the end of the last game week. So Lingard is obviously a bit of an outlier, and the same as Jota actually. We know when Rich had Jota and Liverpool playing well at the start of the season, he was scoring a lot of points given the minutes that he played. Fernandez obviously is playing a lot this season and is getting points, so you can see that sort of nice crossing of the bar and the line there. Gundogan is actually scoring sort of more points on average compared to the minutes he's playing, which you've obviously benefited from massively this season.
Yeah, I have recently, yeah, definitely.
And the same with Foden, actually. When he has played, he has played really well and scored points, which will no doubt give Adam some reassurance. And hopefully, with the Euros coming up in the summer, he will keep playing well and he'll probably be in the team, right? It's just whether Pep gives him a consistent opportunity in the starting 11 for City. House is a bit of an outlier, so obviously Villa centre back, very very good start to the season, but then got injured. So a really high sort of average points per minute ratio given the minutes he played until he was out with injuries. Interestingly, Son sort of underperforming there given the minutes he's played, and Vardy's pretty much bang on. But this doesn't give you enough detail. So if I go to the next slide. These are basically the names of the top 50 players as of the end of the last game week. So ignoring their original draft rank.
Okay.
So you'll start to see names in here that don't feature in the top 50 draft ranked players. And this will show some of the outliers that people wouldn't have thought about at the start of the season, but players that have played particularly well, and actually players that you might want to pick up if you have the opportunity to do so. So starting with the top left, so these are players that have played more than 75% of the total minutes available. So you've got the likes of obviously Fernandez, Salah, Kane, Son, Calvert-Lewin, Sterling, Barnes, Bamford, Grealish. So those are all players that we know have done exceptionally well this season. Grealish, I think we always thought would have a good season, but I think the shock in there is Bamford, who's when he's come up with a newly promoted team and his career history, he's had a really good season in the Premier League, and keeps scoring goals for Leeds, which is great to see and great for Tom, as he's sort of now a contender for the title.
Yep.
Wilson's in there, which Unfortunately, obviously, he's now out with an injury, but really, really strong start to the season up to that point, and a really, really good sort of ratio of points per minute versus time played. And Cancelo, actually, which really surprised me, although may not surprise others. He's had a really good season for City, and he's a core part of Tolly's team. I also sort of touched on the importance of goalkeepers, and you can see Martinez is in there with a very high sort of average points per minute ratio for the minutes he's played. Higher than Rashford, higher than Mane. Pope is the second goalkeeper in there, Diaz. And then you start to see the likes of Aubameyang, who probably should be much higher up in terms of the average points per minute. Maybe we're starting to see him back to his best, but haven't so far this season until fairly recently. And then you've got the likes of Cresswell, who has done really well for West Ham, Watkins for Villa, and Dallas for Leeds, actually, has had a reasonable start to the reasonable season so far. So that's those that have played more than 75% of the available minutes. Any thoughts on that particular graph?
No, I think you've covered it all in great detail so far. There's a lot more detail to go through by the looks of it as well.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it fairly short and sweet. So the second graph looks at those that have played more than 50% but less than 75% of the total minutes available. And you can see right at the top is Gundogan, as you know, you've seen how well he's performed this season. Really high points per minute ratio given the minutes he's actually played. Foden's in there. Vardy sort of slightly lower than basically, where you plot against the minutes he's had available. But then you start to see players that you hadn't seen in the previous section on draft ranks. You look at Stones, you look at Jorginho, Antonio, Zaha, Rafinha, all players that have not featured as much as players would have liked, but have got decent sort of points per minute ratios versus minutes played. Interestingly, if you look at the likes of Ings, Chilwell, Thiago Silva, Ben Mee versus the time played, you start to see the sort of downward trend in points per minute versus time played. So you're sort of looking at the Gundogans to your De Bruyne, Jorginho, Antonio as the sort of top pick players within that particular segment. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's interesting that we've had quite a few people doing stats on players. Is the same names are coming up as the top players this season. So every time someone looks at stats, they always bring in that Bamford's a shock of his performance this year, and the same with Gundogan. There's these players that they keep coming through on these stats. Even if you look at the stats in all different types of ways, it still picks out the same players, which is quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at that second graph again, you look at the likes of players that you thought would do well. I'm thinking of Danny Ings and probably Thiago Silva at Chelsea coming in at centre back, and Chilwell actually another good shout of a player that you think would be scoring higher given the minutes they've had. But maybe that's if I'm thinking of Chilwell, maybe that's a reason why he's not featured recently under Tuchel at Chelsea. Ings was dropped in the game week just gone, so yeah, maybe there's some sort of truth behind the stats here. Walker is another good example where he's been dropped by City. Yeah, it's quite an interesting perspective. The third graph just looks at those that sort of sit between the 25 to 50% of minutes played, and there's not too many of them. I mean, Zinchenko is the obvious outlier, where he's not featured for the first half of the season, but when he has featured for City, he's scored incredible points given the minutes he's played. Really good pickup for Tom, sort of sticking with him, because I know Zinchenko's been in and out of the City back line for a couple of seasons, so he's done well when he has come in to play for Tom. And Dawson, actually, a lot of clean sheets for West Ham. I think he's had a couple of goals as well, so decent sort of points to minutes ratio for a team that's not in the top, let's say the traditional top four, but are sort of knocking on the door for Europe this season.
Yeah.
No offence, George. And then Rudiger has, obviously come back into the Chelsea team with Tuchel. Zuma sort of being the casualty there up until I think last week he played, actually. But yeah, he's achieved decent points when he has come back in. And the final graph just looks at those that have played less than 25% of the total available minutes, and it sort of reinforces what we talked about in the previous slide around Lingard and Jota. So both players that where they have played, they've achieved really high sort of points to minute ratios. And I wonder if you'll start to see players in the league think about picking up Jota, who I think is due back from injury next month. And Liverpool need a bit of a boost, and maybe Firmino's the obvious casualty there. But he played exceptionally well when he did play for Liverpool at the start of the season. So very, very good player to potentially pick up at the bottom. And if I'm rich, I'll be holding on to Lingard, because when he has played, he's got really good points per minute. We talked about Howes in the previous slide. Unfortunately, he's just been injured. And then the fourth one is it Maya? Who plays for Fulham, top, skewed a little bit. He's only played, I think, 4 games, but I think in one game he got 13 points or something. So, he's had a when he has played, he's done particularly well. Foster and Randolph are outliers. They're just two goalkeepers that have played one game and both got clean sheets. And Keller has the same, actually. He's played 2 games for Liverpool and got one clean sheet.
Yeah, I suppose that's the problem, isn't it, with these players at the less than 25%. Although they do well when they play, you don't know when they're going to play, and are they going to play again between now and the end of the season? It's a bit of a gamble, isn't it?
It is. It's sort of hoping that, where they do play well, that you snap them up so they do come into the team. And I think of, Jota's a very good example where no one thought he would go to Liverpool and play week in, week out. But when he did come and started to play well, he got into the team every week. And actually he played with Firmino. They played with, almost like 4 up top. And, Lingard, difficult to know where he'll fit in at West Ham. I know he's been playing well, but I feel like Moyes he's really invested in Bowen. I thought that Bowen would be dropped, but he hasn't been recently anyway. So be interested to get George's take on where Lingard fits into West Ham's team for the rest of the season. But yeah, he's a good one to have given his form.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is pretty much it. So the minutes played is based on the assumption that each game is 90 minutes. Because that's what players, that's what the stats provide in the draft. So it obviously doesn't take into account those extra time minutes and stuff where goals have been scored last minute and that sort of thing. But I think it gives you a good flavour of the players that you want to be looking out for if you are looking to trade versus those perhaps that have thought at the start of the season that in the original 50 sort of draft rank that you'd want to sign up have actually probably underperformed. And it sort of reinforces what we've already talked about in the group and the players that thought would do well that haven't done so well, and actually some of the surprises of the season that we've seen so far. Yeah,
it's a good way of showing basically who's having a good season and who's not. So it does, and like you said, it does highlight where you've got issues with rotation from Pep's team and from a new manager coming in at like Chelsea and dropping players and giving other players a go. So no, it's really interesting.
Oh, well, I hope it was useful to everyone. Looking forward to the feedback.
Yeah, I'm sure people will have good thoughts about what you've done there. So, a different way to show stats about the players.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, where do I start? Because there's so many things that have already been done. It's quite difficult to know. So I was looking at the ICT index. I was trying to work out how that was calculated. It's like a influence. I can't remember what the other two are. But yeah, it's difficult to know where to go next with stats because there's only so much you can actually get from within the draft. You have to copy and paste stuff out and type it up in Excel and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It can be a bit of a pain when you want to do a large sort of data dump to get some decent stats.
Yeah.
But well done. No, it's really good.
Cool. You got to do the draw.
We've got the cup draw. So from the DBF Pokal, we're now into the quarterfinals. So I've been sent a video by the vice president. Okay, here we go.
Good evening and welcome to the Captain Sir Tom Moore Draft DBF Pokal quarterfinal draw. I'm your host, Adam Waters, manager of Peaky Blinders and vice president of the league. This evening we'll be making the quarterfinal draw for the remaining 8 participants in the DBF Pokal. Commiserations to myself and of Laurence Hodgkins, manager of Tikka Salah, for recently being knocked out of the competition. This evening we have 8 balls, all numbered from 1 to 8, which will be drawn at random for the quarterfinal draw. Each numbered ball will correlate to the position of how you finished in the group stage of the DBF Pokal. For example, ball number 1 will be Gareth Northgate, ball number 2 will be Team Row 3.0, ball number 3 will be Emil Pesky, ball number 4 will be Expected to Lose, ball number 5 will be Ajax Trees Down, ball number 6 will be the Whippy Whipnuts, ball number 7 will be the Roque Santa News, and ball number 8 will be Bruno Fernandes. To confirm, the quarterfinal and semi-finals will be a 1-game week shootout, where the highest scoring team from each quarterfinal and each semi-final will progress to the next round. In case of a tie, your teams will go to penalties. This is where the top 5 individual scorers from your teams will go head to head in order from 1 to 5 from another team. The players that have scored the most in each individual player tie will have scored their penalty. If there is a tie amongst the 2 players chosen, then it will both go down as a scored penalty. In case of a draw at the end of your top 5 players, that will then lead to sudden death. So let's get on with the draw. The first name out of the hat and the first quarterfinal team will be ball number 4, expected to lose, manager of Luke Headley. And they will host ball number 5, Ajax Treesdown. Second quarterfinal. Ball number 7, Jack Farthing's Roque Santanudes. They will host ball number 3, Emil Pesky, a family rivalry. The third quarterfinal. Ball number 8, Bruno Fernandes. Let's hope for a good draw for Richard. He will play ball number 2, Team Row 3.0. That leaves 2 teams remaining. Ball number 1, Gareth Northgate, will storm to the group stage, and he will play ball number 6, which is the Whippy Whipnuts. That concludes the quarterfinal draw. I wish you all the very best of luck, and I hope to see your teams in the semi-finals. Thank you very much.
There we have it.
That's good.
I'll just get those back up on screen for you, Laurence.
Good.
I would like your reaction to the 4 quarterfinals that we have.
I think my first thought is Rich. So Bruno Fernandes against Team Row. Looking for, we all love a cup upset. Hopefully we start to see a bit more pep rotation, and Rich can pull something out of the bag in that particular fixture. Yeah, I mean, it'll be quite interesting to see expected to lose against Ajax. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're fairly. Yeah, I mean, I would say quarterfinal 3 and 4, you'd think are pretty one-sided, but like you say, we all love an upset. I think it's worth pointing out that these will not be played in game week 26. They're played in game week 27. So this double game week coming up isn't going to form part of these quarterfinals. Quarterfinal 2, I think, is an interesting one that could be close, but I think it's slightly in Jim's favour at the moment.
Yeah, the wedding could be off if that doesn't go well.
Yeah, and then again, I think, like you just mentioned, myself and George could be, again, a nice close game if my team can perform. So, but yeah, no, I think that's...
Particularly with your quarterfinal, your team's not performing and George's is starting to perform, so you could see a really interesting quarterfinal there, particularly with Aubameyang starting to find his form.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I need to do something, otherwise I could be knocked out.
Get trading, Luke.
But I've been trying, But like we've mentioned many times on the DraftCast, people, they want to make sure they win that trade, so it's really difficult to come out with a better player. And I thought I'd done it with the Mane-Madison one, but now Madison's injured. It's not looking so good, but we'll see.
Yeah, you couldn't have seen.
Hopefully, he won't be out for too long.
Yeah, you couldn't have seen that. And actually, I don't think that was a bad trade at the time. Given the form of Madison and the lack of form of Liverpool generally, I think given Liverpool's lack of sort of defensive capabilities this season, that has a massive impact on the front three. So, yeah, I mean, time will tell, right? But I think, subject to that injury, I think you've probably won that trade.
Yeah, I hope so. So yeah, there we have our 4 quarterfinals all drawn up. We'll get to see the results of those after game week 27. So make sure you listen to a couple of episodes' time to find out who gets through to the semi-finals. And yeah, I think we'll call it there, Laurence. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for your segment. Remember, people, to comment down below what charities you'd like for us to put in our Drafties Life Foundation list. And yeah, any closing thoughts, Laurence?
No, best of luck to the rest of the teams in the cup. And may the best team win. And Luke, thanks for having me. It's been great. And yeah, look forward to being back on soon.
Yep, definitely. I'm not sure how it works out with how many games we've got left of the season, but yeah, it'd be great to get you back. So yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Remember to subscribe, like the video, comment down below. This is the DraftCast, and remember, draft is life. See you next time.